Young Alex, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, is facing the biggest math final of their high school life. They've spent weeks meticulously studying. Formulas, theorems, proofs, you name it, Alex devoured it. The night before the exam, fueled by caffeine and sheer willpower, Alex pulls an all-nighter. Every single formula is crammed into their brain. They walk into the exam hall feeling, exhausted, but confident they've got it all locked down. The exam paper lands on the desk. First question, a tricky calculus problem. Alex knows the formula. They know it. It was right there, crystal clear at 3 a.m. But now, it's like trying to grasp smoke. It's fuzzy, distant, completely inaccessible. Panic starts to set in. Where did it go? Why, after all that effort, did the crucial information vanish when it mattered most? Sound familiar? Maybe not a math final, but perhaps forgetting someone's name moments after being introduced. Or struggling to recall the key points from a meeting you definitely paid attention to. Why does our brain sometimes feel like a leaky sieve? Especially when we've tried so hard to pour information into it. What happened in Alex's brain, or rather what didn't happen during that sleepless night? Could the answer lie not in studying more, but in sleeping better? These are the burning questions we're tackling today. We're going on a journey into the sleeping brain to uncover the magic of memory consolidation. I'm Danny, and this is Big Topics from English Plus Podcast. In this episode, we'll first explore exactly what memory consolidation is and why it's the unsung hero of learning. Then we'll delve into the specific stages of sleep and how each plays a unique role in organizing and storing different kinds of memories. It's like having specialized librarians working the night shift in your brain. We'll uncover the fascinating neuroscience behind how our brains physically strengthen memories while we're lost in dreamland. Now, after we've unpacked the science, we'll get practical. We'll look at real-life implications and actionable strategies you can use tonight to harness the power of sleep for better memory, learning, and overall cognitive function. Think better study habits, sharper recall, and maybe even acing that presentation. And of course, because this is English Plus Podcast, we don't stop there. We'll have our dedicated language-focused section. We'll zoom in on key vocabulary and phrases related to sleep and memory, helping you discuss these concepts fluently. We'll also work on speaking techniques to help you explain complex ideas clearly. Then we'll switch gears to grammar and writing, tackling a writing challenge inspired by our topic and equipping you with a grammatical tool and writing strategies to express your thoughts effectively. And finally, we'll open the door for discussion, pondering some deeper questions about sleep, memory, and modern life. So my friends, get comfortable, maybe don't brew that extra cup of coffee just yet, and let's explore the incredible, essential, and surprisingly active world of your brain on sleep. Let's find out why hitting the hay might be the smartest thing you do all day. Alright, let's start with the basics. We throw around the word memory all the time, but what happens after we experience something or learn a new piece of information? It doesn't just instantly get filed away permanently, right? Now, think back to Alex. They had the information, momentarily at least. This initial stage is often fragile, like a freshly written note on a whiteboard, easily smudged or erased. This is where memory consolidation comes in. So what is memory consolidation? In simple terms, it's the process by which our brains converts those fragile short-term memories into stable long-term ones. It's like moving information from your computer's RAM, temporary and volatile, to the hard drive, where it's stored securely for later access. Without consolidation, most of what we learn or experience would simply fade away, like dreams upon waking. Alex's all-nighter essentially kept everything in the brain's RAM. And when the system got overloaded and tired, poof, information lost. Our brains handle different types of memories, and consolidation works on them differently. Broadly, we can think about two main categories. The first type is declarative memories. These are the what memories: facts, events, concepts, names, faces. Knowing the capital of France, remembering what you've had for breakfast, or learning the information for Alex's math test. These are all declarative memories. They are things you can consciously recall and declare. And then we got the procedural memories. These are the how-to memories, skills, and habits. Riding a bike, playing a musical instrument, typing on a keyboard. These memories are often implicit. You might not be able to easily explain how you do them, you just do them through practice. Now, consolidation works on both types, but as we'll see, different parts of our sleep cycle seem to favor one over the other. Now, think about learning to ride a bike. Initially, it requires intense concentration. Declarative memory is involved too, remembering instructions, for example. But after practice, and crucially after sleep, the process becomes more automatic, more ingrained, stronger procedural memory. The brain has consolidated that skill. Now, here's a question for you to think about. Can you think of a time you learned a new skill, maybe playing a song on the guitar or a new dance move, and found it was suddenly much easier after a night's sleep? What do you think was happening in your brain during that sleep? Now, share your experiences in the comments. And now let's get back to our topic. The key takeaway here is that learning doesn't stop when you close the textbook or finish the practice session. A crucial, active part of the learning process happens later, while you're completely unconscious, during sleep. Sleep isn't just passive rest, it's an active state essential for making memories last. Alex skipped this vital step and paid the price. So, we know consolidation happens during sleep, but how? What's going on in our brains during those magical hours? Well, let's pull back the curtain on the different stages of sleep. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. We don't just fall into one big block of sleep. Our night is actually a dynamic journey through different sleep stages, cycling through them multiple times. Think of it like a recurring program with different segments, each with a specific job to do for our memories. The two main types of sleep are non-rapid eye movement, or NREM sleep, and rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. Now, NREM or NREM itself is divided into stages. But for memory consolidation, the most critical NREM stage is slow wave sleep, or SWS, also known as deep sleep. Now, let's break down the roles. For slow wave sleep, or SWS, or deep sleep if you will, this stage typically dominates the first half of the night. It's called slow wave because our brain waves become slow, synchronized, and high amplitude. Imagine big rolling waves on an EEG readout. Now, what is its memory mission? SWS seems to be primarily involved in consolidating those declarative memories, the facts, the events, the stuff Alex was trying to learn. During SWS, the brain is thought to be engaging in a crucial dialogue. The hippocampus, a brain region vital for forming new declarative memories, like a temporary inbox, talks to the neocortex, the brain's outer layer responsible for long-term storage, the main archive. It's like the hippocampus is saying, "Hey, neocortex, remember that important formula Alex learned? Well, let's file it properly." This dialogue helps transfer memories from the vulnerable hippocampal storage to the more permanent cortical storage. Think of it as transferring files from a USB stick, the hippocampus, to the main computer hard drive, the neocortex. And then we got the rapid eye movement, the REM sleep. Well, this stage becomes more prominent in the second half of the night. It's characterized by, rapid eye movements behind closed eyelids, faster brainwaves, more similar to wakefulness, muscle paralysis so we don't act out our dreams, and vivid dreaming. Now, what's REM's memory mission? REM sleep appears to be more involved in consolidating procedural memories, those skills like riding a bike or playing piano, and also in emotional memory processing. It might help integrate new memories with existing emotional experiences, potentially stripping away the raw emotion while retaining the informational content. Some researchers also believe REM sleep plays a role in creativity and problem solving, perhaps by forging unusual connections between different pieces of information stored in the brain. Maybe that sleeping on a problem and waking up with a solution isn't just a myth. So, we have SWS primarily handling the facts and figures, and REM handling the skills and emotional integration. It's a beautifully coordinated system. The cycles repeat throughout the night, typically lasting about 90 to 120 minutes each. Early cycles are heavy on SWS, and later cycles are rich in REM. This means that cutting sleep short, especially by waking up too early, might disproportionately affect REM sleep and its associated memory functions. And now I have a question for you. Given that SWS dominates early sleep and REM dominates later sleep, how might pulling an all-nighter versus just getting a few hours impact different types of learning? If Alex had slept for, say, only 3 hours instead of 0, which type of memory, declarative or procedural, might have benefited slightly more based on this typical sleep structure? Does that align with your own experiences of short sleep? Well, let me know what you think. And now let's get back to our topic. Well, my friends, it's important to remember that this isn't always a strict division. There's overlap, and the stages likely work together synergistically. But understanding these primary roles helps us appreciate why a full, uninterrupted night of sleep, encompassing all stages in their natural proportions, is so crucial for robust memory formation. It's not just about the quantity of sleep, but the quality and completedness of the sleep cycle. And now that we know when this happens during SWS and REM sleep, let's get a bit more technical and explore how the brain actually physically rewires itself during sleep to make memory stronger. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Okay, let's peek under the hood at the actual nuts and bolts, or perhaps neurons and synapses of memory consolidation during sleep. How does the brain physically change to make a memory more permanent? It's a fascinating process involving communication, reorganization, and even a bit of tidying up. One key mechanism we touched on is systems consolidation, particularly for declarative memories. So this involves that dialogue between the hippocampus and the neocortex, mainly during SWS. Imagine the hippocampus initially tags all the different cortical areas involved in a new memory, the sights, sounds, feelings, facts. During SWS, the hippocampus repeatedly reactivates these tagged areas simultaneously. This repeated co-activation strengthens the direct connections between those cortical areas. Over time, the memory becomes less dependent on the hippocampus and more reliant on this strong cortical network. It's like the hippocampus initially provides the blueprint and construction crew, but once the building, the memory network in the cortex, is solid, the crew can move on to the next project. This hippocampal replay during sleep is thought to be fundamental to making memories long-lasting and independent. But it's not just about transferring information. It's also about strengthening the connections themselves at a microscopic level. This is called synaptic consolidation. Memories are encoded in the brain through changes in the strength of connections, or synapses between neurons. Think of synapses as the junctions where neurons communicate. Learning strengthens specific synaptic connections. Sleep, particularly SWS, seems crucial for stabilizing and enhancing these synaptic changes that occur during wakefulness. It helps lock in the learning at the cellular level. Proteins are synthesized, structures are changed. Well, it's real biological construction work happening while you sleep. Interestingly, sleep also involves a process that sounds counterintuitive: synaptic downscaling or synaptic pruning. While we sleep, especially during SWS, there seems to be a general weakening and pruning of less important synaptic connections that were formed during the day. This might sound bad for memory, but it's actually thought to be incredibly beneficial. Why? Well, think about your brain during a typical day. It's bombarded with information, constantly forming new, weak connections. If all these connections were strengthened equally, your brain would quickly become saturated, noisy, and inefficient. It would be like never deleting old files or emails. Eventually, the system grinds to a halt. Synaptic pruning during sleep helps clear out the noise, the less relevant connections, allowing the truly important salient memories, those strongly activated during learning and replayed during sleep, to stand out and be maintained more efficiently. It improves the signal-to-noise ratio, making your memory system more effective and leaving space for new learning the next day. It's like tidying your desk so you can find the important documents easily. So, my friends, during sleep, your brain is incredibly busy. First, it's replaying important memories, the hippocampus to neocortex. Second, it's strengthening the crucial synaptic connections involved, synaptic consolidation. And third, it's pruning away the less important connections to maintain efficiency and capacity, synaptic pruning or downscaling. It's a highly sophisticated process of selection, stabilization, and integration. Well, now let's challenge this a bit. If sleep helps prune weaker connections, could it potentially lead to forgetting things we did want to remember, but maybe didn't focus on enough during the day? Does this imply that the quality of our attention and engagement while learning during the day is just as important as the sleep that follows? How might this influence your approach to learning new things? Well, this is something worth reflecting on. And let me know what you think. Well, my friends, understanding these mechanisms really underscores why sleep isn't just downtime. It's a fundamental biological process that actively shapes our knowledge, skills, and even our sense of self built upon the memories we consolidate night after night. Alex's all-nighter didn't just mean they were tired. It meant they completely skipped this essential neurological housekeeping and construction work. The foundation for their memories remained shaky, and under the pressure of the exam, it crumbled. Well, we've journeyed through the what, when, and how of sleep and memory consolidation. Now let's bring this knowledge into our daily lives. How can we use this understanding to improve our memory, learning, and overall well-being? Let's get a little practical. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Well, knowing the science is fascinating, but the real power comes from applying it. How can we leverage our understanding of sleep and memory consolidation to actually improve our lives? Now let's move beyond the theory and look at concrete strategies and real-world implications. First, let's prioritize consistent sleep hygiene. Well, this sounds basic, I know, but it is actually the foundation. Remember how different sleep stages play different roles and cycle throughout the night? Getting a full night's sleep, typically between 7 to 9 hours for adults, allows your brain to complete multiple cycles, giving ample time for both SWS heavy consolidation, facts, early night, and REM heavy consolidation, skills, emotional processing, later night. And remember, when we do this, consistency is key. Going to bed and waking up around the same time every day, even on weekends, helps regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle, or what we call the circadian rhythm. This makes it easier to fall asleep and improve sleep quality. Think of it as training your brain when it's time for the memory consolidation shift to begin. And optimize your sleep environment. Make your bedroom dark, quiet, and cool. These conditions promote uninterrupted sleep, preventing disruptions that can fragment sleep cycles and impair consolidation. Blackout curtains, earplugs, or a white noise machine can be your allies here. And mind your pre-sleep routine. Avoid heavy meals, excessive liquids, caffeine, and alcohol close to bedtime. Dim the lights an hour or two before bed. And crucially, limit exposure to blue light from screens. I'm talking about phones, tablets, computers, as it suppresses melatonin production, the hormone that signals sleep. Instead, opt for relaxing activities like reading a physical book, gentle stretching, or meditation. And ask yourself, what's one small change you could make to your pre-sleep routine tonight to signal to your brain that it's time to wind down? Now, let me just give you an example of something Maria is doing. Maria is trying to learn Spanish. She studies vocabulary lists intensely for an hour before bed, often scrolling through flashcard apps on her phone in bed until she drifts off. She feels frustrated by her slow progress. Now, based on what we've learned, what advice would you give Maria? Think about it. Well, maybe perhaps switching to physical flashcards or reviewing notes earlier in the evening, followed by a screen-free relaxation period. Maybe that would allow her brain to better consolidate those new words during SWS. And remember that the blue light from the phone might be hindering the very process she needs. I know it's difficult to have those 2 hours free of screens before you sleep. But if you just try it, you will see the difference in no time. In a couple of days, you will see a big difference in your sleep and in your memory consolidation process. Now let's talk about something else. Well, we talked about prioritizing consistent sleep hygiene. Now let's talk about the second important step, strategic napping for memory boosts. Now, naps aren't just for toddlers. Short naps can be surprisingly effective for memory consolidation, particularly for declarative memories. We got the power nap between 20 to 30 minutes. This short duration primarily involves lighter stages of NREM sleep. It can improve alertness and performance without causing grogginess, which means sleep inertia. Now, while perhaps less powerful for deep consolidation than a full night, it can still offer a cognitive refresh. And we have the consolidation nap between 60 to 90 minutes. It's a longer nap of around 60 to 90 minutes, and this one allows the brain to potentially enter SWS and even a cycle of REM sleep. Studies have shown that naps of this duration can significantly improve recall of factual information learned just before the nap. If you learned something important midday, a well-timed 90-minute nap could help solidify it before the evening. But be mindful though, waking from SWS can cause significant grogginess, so plan accordingly. And of course, think about your own schedule. Is there a point in your day where you feel your learning capacity dip? Could a short strategic nap fit in and potentially help consolidate information learned earlier? Well, I want you to think about that. And of course, here we don't have one-size-fits-all approach. You can use these tips, but of course, adapt them to your lifestyle, to your schedule. Now let's move on to the third point. Integrate sleep into your learning strategy. Now, don't view sleep as interrupting your study or practice. See it as an integral part of it. Avoid cramming. Alex's story is the ultimate cautionary tale. Pulling an all-nighter is counterproductive for long-term retention. You might feel like you're loading information in, but without sleep's consolidation process, it's unlikely to stick. And embrace spaced repetition. Well, this learning technique involves revisiting information at increasing intervals. It works beautifully with sleep consolidation. Learn something today, review it briefly tomorrow after sleep has worked on it, then again in a few days, then a week, and so on. Each review, followed by sleep, strengthens the memory trace. This is far more effective than massed practice, which we just talked about, cramming. And review before sleep. Briefly reviewing key information shortly before your wind-down routine, but remember, not in bed with bright lights, because that kind of defeats the purpose. But reviewing this key information might help tag it as important for the brain's consolidation mechanisms during subsequent sleep. But remember, don't introduce new complex material. Just lightly revisit the essentials. Now let's talk here about another very small case study. David is learning a complex piano piece. He practices for hours on end, getting frustrated when he keeps making the same mistakes. He often practices late into the night. Now, what might happen if David instead practiced in shorter, focused sessions and made sure to get a full night's sleep after each practice day? Well, think about that. And remember all we've said about that and the REM sleep specifically. Well, you know that the sleep, particularly REM sleep, would likely help consolidate the procedural memory, the finger movements, the timing, making the piece feel more automatic and fluid the next day. Now, shorter, consistent practice plus sleep often beats marathon sessions. And now let's talk about another point, and that's recognizing the importance for emotional regulation. Now remember we said how REM sleep helps process emotional memories? Getting enough quality sleep is crucial for emotional balance. When you're sleep deprived, you're more likely to react negatively to stressful situations. The emotional centers of the brain, like the amygdala, become hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex responsible for rational control is impaired. This can impact your relationships, decision-making, and overall mental health. So prioritizing sleep isn't just about remembering facts. It's about maintaining emotional equilibrium. Alright, so let's talk about an action plan here. First, track your sleep. Use a simple journal or an app for a week. Note your bedtime, wake time, and how rested you feel. Look for patterns. Are you getting enough sleep? Is it consistent? And next, implement one sleep hygiene change. Don't try to fix everything at once. It doesn't work. Pick one thing. Maybe no screens an hour before bed, or setting a consistent bedtime, and stick with it for 2 weeks. Do you notice any difference? And next, experiment with pre-sleep review. If you're learning something specific, try a brief 5 to 10 minute review of the key points before your wind-down routine. See if it aids recall the next day. And finally, schedule learning around sleep. If possible, plan intense learning sessions when you know you can get a good night's sleep afterward. Treat sleep as the final, crucial step in your learning process. Well, my friends, learning about sleep and memory isn't just academic, it's deeply practical. By respecting our biological need for sleep and understanding its active role in learning and memory, we can make smarter choices that enhance our cognitive abilities and overall well-being. It's about working with our brains, not against them. So what's one practical step you are going to take this week, inspired by what we've discussed, to improve your sleep and potentially boost your memory? And believe me, committing to even a small change can make a big difference. All right, so that's it. We talked about sleep and memory consolidation, and I hope that you've learned something you didn't know about before, but it's not the end of our episode, of course, because it's English Plus Podcast. Remember, we're going to focus on language next. You don't want to miss that because we're going to be using this language to talk about sleep and to write about it. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. All right, we've delved deep into the fascinating world of sleep and memory. Now let's switch gears and focus on the language we've been using, because understanding the concepts is one thing, but being able to talk and write about them effectively in English is another. Well, this is the language focus section of English Plus Podcast. Now let's start with vocabulary and speaking. Let's zoom in on some key vocabulary we use today. Understanding these terms will not only help you grasp the topic better, but also equip you to discuss psychology, biology, and learning more confidently. Now let's start with memory consolidation. Now we started with this. It's the core process. It's the neurological process by which fragile short-term memories are converted into stable long-term memories. In the context, we said sleep plays a vital role in memory consolidation. Now, you can talk about factors that enhance or impair memory consolidation. For example, stress can impair memory consolidation, or spaced repetition enhances memory consolidation. All right? So that's our first word, or actually phrase, memory consolidation. Next, we've got declarative memory, which is obviously one of the main types of memory. Remember, we talked about it. It's the memory for facts, events, and knowledge that can be consciously recalled or declared. In our context, we said learning historical dates relies heavily on declarative memory. Now, you can use this to contrast it with procedural memory. Remembering the rules of grammar is declarative memory, while speaking fluently involves procedural memory too. And that brings me to procedural memory, which is the other main type. It's the memory for skills and how to perform tasks, often implicit or unconscious. In our context, we said riding a bike becomes an automatic skill thanks to procedural memory consolidation. Now, think about skills. Procedural memory is essential for musicians, athletes, and even typists. All right, that was about procedural memory. Next, we got sleep stages. We talked about sleep stages. Those are the different phases of sleep. These are the distinct periods of sleep characterized by different patterns of brain activity, eye movement, and muscle tone. For example, we talked about the NREM and the REM. Remember, we said the brain cycles through different sleep stages throughout the night? Now, you can discuss the function of different sleep stages or the duration spent in each. And talking about the stages, we talked about the slow wave sleep, SWS, also known as deep sleep. Now, this one is a stage of NREM sleep characterized by slow, synchronized brain waves, crucial for declarative memory consolidation. Now, remember we talked about this. The first half of the night is typically rich in slow wave sleep. Now, you can use that when we want to discuss physical restoration and memory. For example, getting enough SWS is vital after intense learning. And, of course, there's the REM sleep, the famous rapid eye movement sleep. Well, this stage is associated with dreaming. It's a stage of sleep characterized by rapid eye movements, active brain waves similar to wakefulness, muscle paralysis, and vivid dreams. Well, when we want to connect this to memory, it's linked to procedural and emotional memory processing. In our context, we said we typically experience more REM sleep towards the morning. And of course, you can connect REM sleep to dreaming and skill learning. For example, scientists believe REM sleep helps consolidate complex skills. So that was about REM sleep, my friends. Then we talked about the hippocampus, which is a key brain structure. The hippocampus is a complex brain structure embedded deep into the temporal lobe, playing a major role in learning and the formation of new declarative memories. Now, for example, damage to the hippocampus can severely impair the ability to form new memories. Well, my friends, think of the hippocampus as the brain's memory inbox or index. During sleep, the hippocampus replays information to the neocortex. And that's how memory consolidation happens. And talking about the neocortex, what is that? Well, it's the brain's outer layer. Well, it's the largest part of the cerebral cortex, of course. The outer layer of the brain involved in higher order functions like sensory perception, cognition, generation of motor commands, spatial reasoning, and language. It's the primary site for long-term memory storage. Memory consolidation involves transferring information from the hippocampus to the neocortex. You can contrast its role with the hippocampus. While the hippocampus is crucial for initial learning, the neocortex holds memories for the long term. And remember the very important concept we talked about, that's synaptic pruning or downscaling. Well, it's the tidying up process. Well, this one is a neurological process occurring during sleep where weaker or less relevant synaptic connections are eliminated or weakened, improving the efficiency and signal clarity of neural networks. Now, synaptic pruning during SWS helps the brain manage information overload. Now, you can use it by explaining its benefits. You can say, far from being detrimental, synaptic downscaling is essential for effective learning and memory. And next, we got sleep hygiene. These are simply practices for good sleep. These are the habits and practices that are conducive to sleeping well on a regular basis. Practicing good sleep hygiene can significantly improve sleep quality and duration. You can give examples. Key elements of sleep hygiene include maintaining a consistent sleep schedule and creating a restful environment. We also talked about spaced repetition, which is an effective learning technique. It's a learning strategy where information is reviewed at increasing intervals of time. Spaced repetition leverages memory consolidation processes during sleep. You can recommend it for studying. You can say, using spaced repetition software can make learning vocabulary much more efficient. And finally, we got the word counterintuitive. Counterintuitive means something that goes against what you'd expect. It's contrary to intuition or to more sense expectation. Well, the idea that weakening synapses through pruning actually helps memory can seem counterintuitive. Now, you can use this word to describe surprising findings or concepts. For example, it's counterintuitive, but shorter, more frequent study sessions are often better than one long cram session. All right, these are the words that I wanted to share with you. Now let's focus on speaking. Let's focus on explaining complex processes simply. Talking about neuroscience can get complicated fast. A key speaking skill is breaking down complex processes like memory consolidation into understandable steps using clear language and analogies. Well, let's learn about signposting. That means using words and phrases to guide your listener through the process. Examples of signposting are words like first, next, then, after that, crucially, meanwhile, as a result, ultimately. This helps structure the explanation. For example, you can say something like, first, the information enters the hippocampus like a temporary inbox. Then, during slow-wave sleep, the hippocampus replays this information. As a result, connections in the neocortex are strengthened. Ultimately, the memory becomes independent of the hippocampus. So, my friends, that's one way to do it. You can use signposting to explain complex processes simply. And you can also use analogies. And what do we mean by that? That means to compare complex brain functions to simpler, relatable concepts. Now, we use the computer RAM hard drive analogy for short, long-term memory. The filing cabinet, the librarians, the USB stick, the construction crew, the messy desk, etc. All these are analogies we use to make abstract ideas concrete and easier to understand. Now, how do we practice this? Try creating your own analogy for synaptic pruning. What could you compare it to? Maybe gardening, weeding, editing a document, deleting unnecessary words? It's up to you. Or you can come up with your own idea, but practicing those analogies makes it a lot easier for you to come up with one and to make those complex ideas a lot easier to understand. But of course, that's not everything. Remember also to define key terms. When introducing a technical term like hippocampus or synaptic pruning, briefly define it in simple terms before explaining its role. Assume your listener might not know the term. Well, of course, this thing is kind of sensitive because it depends on your audience. If you're confident your audience would know all these technical words, don't define them because that will be kind of insulting their intelligence. But if you're not sure, you can explain it, but not in a way to make them feel stupid. You can make it as a natural part of what you're saying. So it doesn't sound like you're just telling them about something and you've already assumed that they have no idea what it is. All right? So use that carefully, defining key terms, but it is important because at some point you don't want to risk losing them. All right? And finally, remember to check for understanding, implicitly or explicitly. In conversation, you might pause or use phrases like, does that make sense? Or think of it this way. Now, even in a podcast, pausing briefly or rephrasing a key point can help listeners process. So, let's get to our speaking challenge now. Your challenge this week is to explain the basic concept of memory consolidation during sleep to a friend or family member who hasn't heard this episode. Try to use at least 3 of the vocabulary words we discussed. Focus on using signposting language to structure your explanation and maybe try using one simple analogy, either one we used or your own, of course. The goal is clarity and simplicity. So, can you make the science accessible? Trust me, my friends, if I can do it, you can do it. And you might say that it's not that important to talk about science. Nobody cares about science, but actually we all care about science. We just don't know it. So try this challenge, and if you're brave enough, you can even try to record yourself and even send me the recording. I will listen to it and I will give you my feedback. Now, that was the vocabulary and speaking part. Now, let's get to the grammar and writing part. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Now, let's focus on honing your writing skills, inspired by the exploration of sleep and memory. The writing challenge is to write a short reflective piece, around 200 to 300 words, about a personal experience where you clearly notice the impact of sleep or lack thereof on your memory, learning, or even your mood and decision-making. It could be a positive experience like waking up and suddenly understanding something, or a negative one like Alex's exam disaster, or simply feeling foggy and forgetful after a poor night's sleep. Describe the situation, what you observed about your mental state, and what connection you now see to the principles of sleep and memory consolidation we've discussed. Now let me give you some grammar and writing tips to ace this challenge. To write a compelling reflection, you'll need to clearly express cause and effect, potentially compare different states, and structure your thoughts logically. Now here's where grammar comes in handy. Now let's first talk about showing cause and effect. Now you need to link the amount or quality of sleep, the cause, to its impact on your memory or cognition, the effect. We can use connectors. Use conjunctions and transition words like because, as, since. For example, I couldn't recall the details because I had only slept for 4 hours. Or, as I hadn't slept well, my concentration was poor. You can also use therefore, consequently, and as a result. You can say, I pulled an all-nighter, therefore my performance on the test suffered. Or, I prioritized getting 8 hours of sleep. Consequently, I felt much sharper during the morning meeting. Or you can say, my sleep was constantly interrupted. As a result, I struggled to learn the new software. You can also use due to and owing to. For example, my forgetfulness was likely due to severe sleep deprivation. Now, we usually follow those by a noun phrase. And of course, you can also use verbs that imply causation. For example, lack of sleep led to difficulties, or a good night's rest resulted in better recall, or pulling an all-nighter impaired my ability to think clearly. So, That was the first point that I wanted to share with you, showing cause and effect using connectors or verbs. And another useful tool for this writing challenge is to use conditional sentences. Now, these are great for reflecting on hypothetical alternatives or general principles. Now, we got, of course, many types, and maybe we talk a lot about conditionals, but we just talk about them in context, right? So even if we talk about them 1,000 times, that's fine, as long as you can use them in this writing challenge. So let's talk about the first type, the real possibility. If I get enough sleep tonight, I will probably remember this information better tomorrow. Talking about the future. The second type is hypothetical or unreal present or future. If I got more sleep regularly, I would likely have a better memory. That's reflecting on a general habit that you actually don't do. Or we can go to type 3 to talk about hypothetical unreal past. If I had slept more before the exam, I would have performed better. That's reflecting on a specific past event and its unrealized outcome. Well, this is perfect for reflecting on past experiences like the one in the writing challenge. If Alex hadn't pulled an all-nighter, he might have accessed the formula easily. So, my friends, that's about using conditional sentences for this writing challenge. But don't forget about comparing and contrasting. You might want to compare how you felt or performed after good sleep versus poor sleep. Now, you can use connectors, words like whereas or while. You can say, after a full night's sleep, my mind felt clear, whereas after only 5 hours, I felt foggy. Or you can say, while cramming seemed productive at the time, sleeping would have been more beneficial. You can use compared to or in contrast to. You can say, for example, compared to the days when I slept poorly, my focus was significantly better. Or, in contrast to the previous night, I woke up feeling refreshed. And you can also use on the one hand and on the other hand. For example, on the one hand, staying up late allowed me to finish the report. On the other hand, the quality of my analysis likely suffered due to fatigue. Now let me give you some writing structure tips. Start with the introduction. Briefly set the scene. What was the situation? For example, preparing for a test, learning a skill, a demanding workday, etc. And then you got the body paragraphs. Describe what happened. Detail your sleep pattern or lack thereof, and then describe your mental state, memory performance, or mood. Use the cause and effect language here. Connect your experience explicitly to concepts like consolidation if you can. For example, you can say, I realized my brain simply hadn't had the chance to consolidate what I'd learned. And from there, you can move to the conclusion. You can reflect on the experience. What did you learn from it? How has it changed, or how should it change your approach to sleep and learning or work? Now, use conditional sentences here, perhaps to reflect on what could have been different. Now, let me give you an example snippet here, using some of the techniques we talked about. I remember preparing for a major presentation last year. Because I was nervous, I stayed up until 2 a.m. tweaking slides, consequently getting only about 4 hours of sleep. The next day was a disaster. While I knew the material intellectually, retrieving specific facts felt like wading through treacle. My thinking was slow and I stumbled over questions I should have known instantly. If I had prioritized sleep over those last-minute changes, I would undoubtedly have delivered a much more coherent and confident presentation. It was a harsh lesson on how crucial sleep is, likely due to the lack of memory consolidation and cognitive restoration. Well, my friends, that's just a simple example. I'm just giving you pointers here. I don't want you to copy or to do exactly what I did. I bet you can do it a lot better. But anyway, I want you to take on the writing challenge, use these grammar tools and structuring tips to craft a thoughtful reflection. And of course, you can share your pieces with me, especially I'm talking here to my Patreon subscribers. You can share your pieces with me, and I will definitely give you my feedback to your writing. And now that we're done with our language focus section, we're left with one last section, and that's the discussion section, where I will share with you some discussion questions to keep the conversation going. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. All right, my friends, we've covered a lot of ground from the science of sleep stages to practical tips and language focus. But the conversation doesn't end here. Now it's time to think a bit more broadly and critically about sleep, memory, and our modern lives. I've got a few discussion questions for you, and I genuinely encourage you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section, or of course you can talk to your friends and family about that or anyone who's interested. Because remember, discussing something, talking about it, That's what really makes you master the topic, to take both your language and knowledge to the next level. Now let me start with the first question, and that has to do with personal prioritization. Now, honestly, how much do you really prioritize sleep in your daily life compared to other demands like work, study, social life, or even entertainment? Has listening to this episode changed your perspective on sleep's importance? I'll be truthful about that because we all face these juggling acts. My second question is related to the hustle culture conflict. Now, we often hear messages about hustling, working long hours, and sleeping when you're dead. Now, how does this societal pressure conflict with the scientific reality of sleep's importance for cognitive function, learning, and memory? Have you ever felt this pressure, and how did you navigate it? Is it possible to be ambitious and well-rested at the same time? Well, think about it. Now, my next question has to do with technology's double-edged sword. Technology offers tools for learning, apps, online courses, etc., and even sleep tracking. But it also bombards us with blue light, endless notifications, and addictive content that can severely disrupt sleep. How do you manage technology's impact on your sleep hygiene and consequently your memory? Do you have any successful strategies you can share? Well, we could all use some successful strategies or things to try. My next question has to do with educational and workplace implications. Now, given the clear link between sleep and learning or performance, should schools and workplaces be structured differently? Now, think about school start times for teenagers, whose sleep cycles naturally shift later, or workplace cultures that reward long hours over productivity and well-being. What changes, big or small, do you think could make a real difference? And now we get to our final question. We focus on memory consolidation, but sleep impacts so much more. Mood, immune function, physical health, and creativity. When you think about the potential long-term consequences of chronic sleep deprivation in society, what worries you the most? And conversely, what benefits could we see if we collectively started valuing sleep more? Think about these questions, my friends, and of course, I would love to discuss these questions with you. And you know where to reach me. Of course, you can reach me on the website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, on my Patreon page, or you can send me an email directly if you want, Danny@EnglishPlusPodcast.com. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of English Plus Podcast. We journeyed into the sleeping brain today, uncovering the incredible process of memory consolidation. We learned how fragile short-term memories become lasting knowledge, explored the specific roles of slow wave and REM sleep, and peeked at the neurological mechanisms like hippocampal replay and synaptic pruning. And then we got practical. We discussed how to improve sleep hygiene, use strategic naps, and integrate sleep into our learning strategies for better memory and cognitive function. And of course, we sharpen our language skills, focusing on key vocabulary, explaining complex ideas simply, and using grammar effectively to reflect on personal experiences related to sleep and memory. Well, the key takeaway here? Sleep is not wasted time. It's an active, essential process for learning, memory, emotional regulation, and overall health. Prioritizing sleep might just be one of the most productive things you can do. So, my friends, what was your biggest takeaway from today's episode? Do you have any sleep strategies that work wonders for you? Share your thoughts, reflections on the writing challenge, or answers to our discussion questions in the comment section on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, or of course over on our Patreon page. I love hearing from you. And of course, if you found this episode insightful or helpful, please consider sharing it with a friend or colleague who might benefit. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. For even more learning resources, including transcripts, exercises, PDF downloads, and ad-free listening, consider becoming a premium member on Patreon or subscribing on Apple Podcasts. Your support helps us keep creating valuable content for you. And don't forget, my friends, to visit EnglishPlusPodcast.com daily for our posts that have a lot of vocabulary, grammar, literature, history, and much more. All designed to take your English and knowledge to the next level every single day. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. This has been Danny. Until next time, sleep well, learn lots, and keep your English shining. And remember, never stop learning with English Plus Podcast. I'll see you next time.